"One more outburst from you, Mr. Erickson, and I will hold you in contempt of court," the judge warned, her voice tight with anger. I could see the flush creeping up her neck, her face turning a shade of red that almost made me laugh. It was a ridiculous sight, really, but I knew better than to let my amusement show. Still, it was hard to stifle the chuckle that threatened to escape. "Mr. Young, I strongly advise you to control your client," the judge continued, her eyes narrowing at my attorney. Bert Young, my lawyer, gave me a look that was somewhere between exasperation and desperation. I'd been warned plenty of times, but holding my tongue was not my strong suit, especially when faced with a judge like this one. A guy once told me I'd never met a word I didn't want to turn into an F-bomb, and he wasn't wrong. It just slipped out sometimes, as naturally as breathing. As I opened my mouth to speak, I saw the judge's knuckles whiten as she gripped the edge of the bench. Bert shot me a look that screamed, "Not another word unless you want to spend the night in jail." Even the court recorder, usually as stoic as a statue, stifled a giggle, no doubt bracing for the inevitable storm of obscenities. Across the courtroom, my soon-to-be ex-wife, Robin, sat nervously between my ex-best friend, Bruce, and his furious wife, Cheryl. The three of them looked like they were on the verge of a breakdown. Robin's face was a picture of shame and defeat, while Bruce looked like a man who just lost everything, which he had. Cheryl, on the other hand, was positively seething, her eyes shooting daggers at both of them. She clearly wasn't pleased that their dirty laundry was being aired in public. Now, you might wonder how I ended up being scolded by this sanctimonious simpleton in the black robe. Well, it all started on an ordinary Tuesday. My name's Jack Erickson, a 32-year-old foreman in the city maintenance department of Stonemore, Colorado. I've been working for the city since 2 days after I graduated from high school. Winter finds me plowing major roads, and summer has me doing whatever needs to be done. Robin, my wife, works a few hours a week at the church, mostly to get away from housework. Our department is split into 4 quadrants, each with a supervisor and a foreman. I never became a supervisor because I didn't go to college, and I tend to avoid office politics like the plague. But the funny thing is, the supervisors usually check with guys like me before making any decisions. Monday evening brought a nasty June thunderstorm, hail, high winds, the works. My quadrant got the worst of it, so we had a ton of debris to clear. I had 6 crews with dump trucks out picking up branches and broken bits of who knows what, while I drove around in a pickup checking on storm drains. If they were blocked, I'd call in one of the vacuum trucks at my disposal. By the time we were done, I hadn't even had time to think about mowing the parks or graveling the alleys. When I got home that Tuesday evening, all I could think about was heating up the leftover meatloaf from Sunday for dinner. That's what I expected, anyway. But lately, my wife hadn't cooked a weekday meal in months. I wanted to crack open a 12-pack, but the red mark on the calendar meant I could only have 1 beer since I was on emergency standby. Robin was already in the shower by the time I ate, and I doubted I'd see her again that night. The routine had been going on for months, and frankly, I was sick of it. Our love life was the worst part. We used to have sex 3 or 4 times a week, but in the past 3 months, I'd gotten laid exactly twice and received 2 half-hearted hand jobs. She barely noticed me anymore, and that night was no different. So, I sat in front of the TV, watching the Rockies play the Padres, wishing I had a bottle of Jägermeister around 10 o'clock. Just as I was about to call it a night, my phone rang. It was City County Dispatch about a water main break near Birchwood Mall. With a groan, I packed up some snacks and headed out. At the city yard, I grabbed the keys to a dump truck, hitched up a trailer with a backhoe, and waited for my crew. We worked through the night, breaking pavement, hauling mud, and fixing the pipe. By the time we were done, it was nearly 9:30 the next morning, and I was beat. I pulled into my driveway at 1:45 p.m., knowing I was off work until Friday. The house was quiet, Robin nowhere to be found. She was probably off doing whatever she did all day, which didn't seem to include housework. I grabbed a beer and made a sandwich, trying to push the fatigue aside. But as I closed the fridge, I heard something I couldn't ignore, the unmistakable sound of a woman having sex coming from upstairs. I froze, a cold knot forming in my stomach. No wonder you don't screw me anymore. I muttered, grabbing my Kimber 45 from the coat closet. My mind was racing, but I had to see it with my own eyes. The noise got louder as I climbed the stairs. I checked the master bedroom first, empty. The bathroom, also empty. There were only 2 rooms left, the guest bedroom and Robin's craft room. The guest bedroom was empty too. Heart pounding, I kicked open the craft room door, weapon at the ready, but it was empty as well. But the sound was loudest there, and I noticed the window overlooking the backyard was open. I leaned out and saw something that made my blood run cold. Tommy and Brenda McBain, the neighbors' kids, were having sex by their pool. Tommy was a college junior, and Brenda was about to start her freshman year. She'd had a crush on me, which made this all the more disturbing. I was witnessing inbreeding, something I thought only happened in places like Mississippi. But then I saw something even worse. In the window of Bruce's house, just across the yard, I saw Bruce's bare back, moving rhythmically. He was clearly drilling someone, and I hung around, hoping to catch a glimpse of Cheryl. But when Bruce turned around, my heart stopped. The woman beneath him wasn't Cheryl, it was Robin. Holy crap! I yelled so loudly that Tommy and Brenda stopped what they were doing and bolted for their house. I froze, unsure what to do. I aimed at Bruce, but before I could pull the trigger, they disappeared. Goddamn filthy woman, I shouted, grabbing my Mossberg and loading it with buckshot. Bruce and that promiscuous bitch are going to die, and Cheryl's cat and parakeet are fair game too. I stormed out of the house, pistol tucked in my jeans, halfway down the driveway before I stopped. Everything suddenly made sense. The house wasn't clean, meals were from the freezer, and little Johnny was neglected because Bruce was wearing her out. She took so many showers that the reservoir should be named after me. I got into my truck and left tire marks on the street as I sped toward Lowe's. On the way, I processed everything. She never cooked because Bruce was exhausting her. She couldn't clean while getting her freak on. But the biggest question was why the 2 people I trusted most would betray me like that. At Lowe's, I went straight to the door section and picked up 3 new lock sets. Jeannie at the paint counter waved, but I barely noticed, half-heartedly waving back. When I got home, Brenda and Tommy were waiting in my driveway. What do these perverts want? I wondered, rolling my eyes. They looked like they were going to the gallows. Brenda offered a sheepish smile. We are sorry to have disturbed you, Mr. Erickson. We didn't mean to offend you. It's just... She trailed off, looking down at her feet. I cut her off. I don't care if you screw each other until your holes turn to tunnels. It's none of my business. You guys aren't even on my radar of problems right now. They walked away sheepishly, but I felt Brenda's eyes lingering on my hips as I went inside. I set the lock sets down and went to find my tools. In the kitchen, my blood boiled when I saw Bruce sitting at my table. What are you doing in my house, you cursed bastard? I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. I came to talk to you as a friend, Bruce replied, but there was a tremor in his voice. Friend? I laughed bitterly. With friends like you, who needs enemies, do you think I'm just going to say, hey Bruce, how were my wife's holes this morning? Jack, it doesn't have to be this way, he said, trying to sound calm, but I could see the fear in his eyes. You're right. Hand me that butcher knife, I instructed, nodding toward the knife on the table. He looked at the knife, then at the Kimber in my hand. Come on, Jack, he said shakily. You can't seriously expect. Pick it up a hole. You love Jesus so much, I want you to meet him. Now pick up the knife and let me put the make my day law to use, you trespassing piece of pious crap, I ordered, my voice steady, but inside I was a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. Bruce's face went pale. He jumped up from the table, knocking the chair over in his haste, and bolted for the door. He stopped on the porch, turning back with desperation in his eyes. Jack, we've been friends forever. Are you really willing to throw that all away? His voice wavered, a mix of fear and pleading. I lost 2 people today, Bruce, but I think when I get past all of it, I'll realize it's no real loss, I said, my voice cold as ice. Where's Robin? I asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear him say it. She's at my house. She's afraid to come over here, he admitted, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Tell her she has 5 minutes to get over here if she wants any chance of staying married to me, I said, my patience wearing thin. Now get off my property before I risk prison just to feel better. Bruce scurried off, and I watched him go, wondering how long it would take Robin to drag her cheating bum home. 4 minutes later, I heard her sniveling and sobbing before I even saw her. She must have been crying all the way from Bruce's house. People probably wondered what was going on when they saw her walking up the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face, her shoulders hunched in shame. When she reached me, she reached out to hug me, but I stepped back, holding up a hand to stop her. "Keep your filthy hands to yourself," I commanded, my voice hard. "But I love you, baby. I only want to be with you," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Let's go inside. These neighbors don't need to hear our business," I said, turning and moving into the living room. I sat down in my favorite chair, leaving her to sit on the love seat across from me. "Would you sit next to me?" she asked, her voice small, almost childlike. "Hell no. I don't want to be near you," I refused without hesitation. The tension in the room was palpable, and the silence that followed was suffocating. I hated awkward silences, so I decided to jump right in. "How long have you been screwing that idiot?" I asked, my tone accusatory. Robin hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "He loves you like a brother. He's your best friend," she responded, avoiding the question. "Jack was my friend," I corrected her sharply. "Friends don't screw their friends' wives." "It's just sex. I still love you," she insisted, her voice trembling, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. What a load of crap. It's just sex. Whoever thought of that excuse deserves a cinder block to the head, I yelled, the anger bubbling up again, my hands clenching into fists. "No need to be angry. You still have me. I'm not going anywhere," she said, almost defiantly. "Yes, you are. You're choosing Bruce over me in our marriage. You can't give me 5 minutes, but you can bend over for him anytime." "How wonderful," I retorted sarcastically, my voice dripping with disdain. I could feel a headache coming on, the stress of the situation weighing heavily on me. I put my head in my hands, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Robin started to get up and walk toward me, but I stopped her with a glare. "Sit back down. I hope it's worth throwing away a decade of marriage." "I'm not ending our marriage. We can stay married. I'll just have sex with Bruce. I don't love him, just his. He says I can take care of your needs once or twice a week," she explained, as if she was offering some kind of compromise. "How kind of him," I said bitterly. "I think I'll find someone else to take care of my needs." "No, you're my husband. No one else should have sex with you. We are still man and wife," she argued, her voice rising in desperation. "Not for much longer. Ex-wife is more fitting for someone like you and that hypocritical cur Bruce Harris," I declared, my voice cold and final. "Please don't talk like that. I love you with all my heart, but I love Bruce's, big thing too. You just need to understand Bruce's plan. We all can be happy," she tried to reason, her voice pleading. "I understand perfectly. You want to have your cake and eat it too," I concluded, my tone flat, emotionless. "It's not like that at all," she protested weakly. "Then explain it to me," I challenged, my eyes narrowing as I waited for her response. "I can't. You'd never," she started, but then she glanced at the clock on the wall and stammered. "Well, I think Bruce wants me back in 3 minutes." "What the hell are you babbling about?" I asked, seeing the shock on her face as the realization of what she'd just said hit her. "You've never called me names or talked this way to me. What's gotten into you?" she inquired, her voice trembling with confusion and fear. "Let's see. I haven't slept since 6 a.m. yesterday, and I worked all night. Or maybe it's because I got home to find my wife drilling someone else. You idiot," I snapped, the words dripping with venom. She started crying again, her tears flowing freely as she headed for the door. "That's it. Go to Bruce. Go get the meat you crave," I shouted after her, my voice echoing through the house. She turned at the door, her face a mask of confusion and hurt. "I don't see why we can't keep things as they are. You're not home all the time. I can be his while you're at work." I slammed the door behind her so hard I thought it might splinter. "Screw you. Go eat your cake," I yelled, my voice hoarse from the strain. I stood there for a moment, my back against the door, feeling utterly defeated. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I forced them back, refusing to let them fall. Dad would have whipped my bum if he'd seen me crying like this, so I sucked it up and got on with my tasks. I changed the locks on all the doors and recoded the garage opener. By 4 o'clock, I was exhausted and needed to sit. I flipped on the TV to Jerry Springer. How fitting, a show about cheating wives and messed up families. I didn't make it far before falling asleep, the day's events finally catching up with me. When I woke up, it was past 9 and someone was knocking at my door. I got up, groggy and disoriented, and answered it. It was Bruce. "What do you want?" "I ought to beat the crap out of you," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I need a favor," Bruce responded, his voice shaky. "If you don't take the cake, I don't have a girlfriend for you to screw." "Try elsewhere," I retorted, the anger bubbling up again. "Robin needs you. She's crying her eyes out. Can't you call her and tell her you're not angry and everything will be okay?" he pleaded, his eyes filled with desperation. "Tell her everything will be okay? I'm done with both of you. What's Cheryl gonna say when she finds out you're screwing Robin?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "She knows. She's happy the sneaking around can stop. She wants you two to stay together," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get off my porch. Tell her stuff will be on the porch in the morning. Any door knocking will be met unkindly," I warned, my voice cold and final. I slammed the door in his face and went for a cold beer. For some reason, I took my 6-pack upstairs and sat in Robin's craft room, staring out the window into the night. As I sat there, I realized I needed evidence for the divorce. So, I grabbed the camcorder and started filming. I watched Bruce's house, noting any movement. Eventually, I saw Cheryl and Robin sitting on the porch swing, talking quietly. Just then, headlights lit up Bruce's driveway. Tom must have been home from managing his restaurant. He went straight to the pool and started stripping. What did I do to deserve this? I muttered to myself, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. I kept the camera rolling, capturing every detail. Bruce's house, the McBains, everything. Evidence was mounting, and I knew I had what I needed to make them all pay. Tomorrow, I'd start setting things in motion. They thought they could betray me and walk away unscathed? They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The weight of betrayal still sat heavily on my shoulders, but now it was accompanied by a cold, calculating resolve. They thought they could get away with this, but they were wrong. I was done playing the victim. It was time for them to face the consequences. I started my day by making a few phone calls. First, I called Bert Young, my lawyer, to set up a meeting. "Bert, it's Jack. We need to talk about the next steps. I've got some evidence that's going to blow this case wide open." "Jack, you sound different. Whatever you've got, bring it in. Let's get this over with," Bert replied, his tone cautious but intrigued. Next, I called Mike Starr, an old high school buddy turned investigative reporter. Mike had a nose for scandal, and I knew he'd love this story. "Mike, it's Jack Erickson. I've got something you're going to want to see. Meet me at Mabby's bar tonight." Mike didn't ask for details. He knew if I was calling, it had to be something big. He simply agreed and hung up. With those calls out of the way, I turned my attention to Robin's belongings. I packed up every trace of her from our home, clothes, toiletries, even that ridiculous scrapbook she kept of our marriage. Each item felt like a small victory as I stuffed them into garbage bags and set them by the door. By the time I was done, the house felt cleaner, lighter. Around noon, I headed over to Bert's office. The air in the room was thick with anticipation as I handed him the USB stick. "This is everything," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You'll find video proof of Robin's affair with Bruce and a little something extra that might interest you." Bert plugged the USB into his computer and watched in silence. As the footage played, his expression shifted from surprise to disgust and finally to something resembling satisfaction. When it was over, he turned to me, his eyes sharp. "This changes everything. With this, we can go after her hard. No alimony, no settlement. She's going to walk away with nothing." I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction settle in. "That's what I want, but I also want Bruce to pay. He's been bleeding the city dry with his so-called charity work, and it's time that stopped." Bert raised an eyebrow. "You have something in mind?" "I've already started the ball rolling," I said, explaining the calls I'd made to the city's accounting department and the water company. "Bruce owes the city thousands for materials and services he's been taking for free. I've made sure those bills are going to come back to haunt him." And that's just the beginning. Bert leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Jack, you're playing this smart. I'll make sure this all gets handled on the legal side. You just keep gathering evidence and stay out of trouble. Trouble's the last thing I want, I lied, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. I left Bert's office feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. The wheels were in motion, and there was no turning back now. That evening, I met Mike Starr at Mabby's bar. The place was packed, as it always was on a Friday night. City workers, cops, and locals crowded the bar, and the noise level was almost deafening. Mike was already at a corner table, a beer in hand. I slid into the seat across from him and handed him a copy of the USB stick. This is what I was telling you about. It's going to be the story of the year. Mike didn't waste any time. He popped the USB into his laptop and watched, his eyes widening as the footage played out. When it was over, he let out a low whistle. Damn, Jack, this is some serious stuff. You sure you want to go public with this? I'm sure, I said, my voice steady. I want everyone to know what they did, and I want to take Bruce down, his church, his reputation. I want it all destroyed. Mike nodded, understanding the gravity of what I was asking. I can work with this, but you know it's going to get ugly. Once this hits the news, there's no going back. Good, I replied. I'm counting on it. We talked for a while longer, going over the details and planning the best way to release the story. Mike promised to start staking out Bruce's church and the hotel, getting more footage and gathering as much dirt as possible. When we were done, I left the bar feeling a little lighter, knowing that the first stage of my plan was well underway. The next few days were a blur of activity. I made sure the city's inspectors were all over Bruce's church, nitpicking every detail, finding every violation. The bills started piling up, and Bruce was scrambling to keep up. Meanwhile, Mike Starr was making headway with his investigation, getting closer to blowing the lid off the whole operation. Thursday morning, I was in my garage, working on a cabinet I'd been restoring. It was a way to keep my hands busy, to keep my mind off the chaos swirling around me. I was deep in thought when I heard a noise behind me. Turning, I saw Brenda McBain standing in the doorway, looking nervous. Hi, Jack, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Brenda, I acknowledged, setting down my tools. What's up? I have something you might need, she stammered, holding out a small envelope. I took it from her, frowning. What's this? Just open it when you're alone, she said quickly, her eyes flicking around the garage as if she was afraid someone might be watching. I watched her leave, puzzled by her behavior. When I was sure she was gone, I opened the envelope. Inside was a set of photos and another USB stick. The photos were grainy, taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking what they showed. Bruce, Robin, and Cheryl at the old King James Hotel, involved in acts that made my stomach turn. I plugged the USB into my laptop and watched the footage. It was even worse than I'd imagined. The three of them, along with other members of what could only be described as some kind of secret club, engaging in things that were not only morally bankrupt, but also illegal. My mind raced as I realized what I had in my hands. This wasn't just about a simple affair anymore. This was about a network of people who thought they were above the law, who used their positions of power to get what they wanted, and I was about to bring it all crashing down. I made another call to Mike Starr, telling him what I'd found. His reaction was exactly what I expected, excitement mixed with a healthy dose of caution. This is huge, Jack. We need to handle this carefully. But if we do it right, it's going to take down more than just Bruce. We're talking judges, city officials, maybe even some higher-ups. Do it, I said, my voice firm. Expose them all. As I hung up the phone, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. They thought they could betray me and get away with it. They thought they were untouchable, but they were wrong. I was going to make them suffer, just like Corpse Grinder's lyrics echoed in my mind. Make them suffer, make them suffer, make them suffer. The first crack in their fortress of lies began to appear. I woke early, too restless to stay in bed, and checked the local news, hoping to see the first signs of the storm I had set in motion. And there it was, a small article buried in the back pages of the Stonemore Gazette. City officials under scrutiny for unauthorized church donations. It was a modest start, but but I knew it was only the beginning. I smirked, satisfied, as I poured myself a cup of coffee. I had no doubt that this little snowball would soon turn into an avalanche. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about the meeting I had scheduled with Bert later that morning. We needed to finalize the details for the upcoming court hearing, but more importantly, we needed to discuss how to leverage this new info. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in Bert's office, the USB stick containing the latest footage safely in my pocket. Bert looked up from a stack of papers as I entered. A weary smile. "Jack, you're making waves already," he said, waving the Gazette at me. "This is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?" I nodded, sliding the USB across his desk. "It's all on here, Bert. Everything we need." Bert inserted the USB into his computer, and we watched the footage together. His expression grew darker with every passing second. When it was over, he leaned back in his chair. "Rub, this is bad, really bad," he muttered. "For them, I mean, for us, this is a goldmine." "They thought they could keep their secrets hidden," I said, my voice cold. "They thought they could betray me and walk away unscathed. But they were—" Bert nodded slowly, his mind clearly working through the implications. "With this, we can do more than just win the divorce case. We can take down everyone involved. But Jack, you need to be careful. Once this goes public, they're going to come after you. They'll try to discredit you, maybe even worse." "I'm ready," I replied, my voice firm. Mike gave the signal, and his team moved in. They approached the hotel with the stealth and precision of a SWAT team, cameras rolling as they entered through the basement window Brenda had shown me. I stayed outside, watching from a safe distance as they infiltrated the building. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Then the first shouts echoed from inside, followed by the sound of scuffling. A moment later, the door burst open, and people began pouring out, half-dressed, disheveled, panic written all over their faces. Bruce was the first to emerge, his face pale as he realized what was happening. He tried to push past the cameras, but Mike's crew was relentless, capturing every moment of his humiliation. Robin stumbled out after him, clutching a robe around her shoulders, her eyes wide with terror. Judge Kagan came next, her normally composed demeanor shattered as she tried to shield her face from the cameras. It was chaos, pure and simple, and it was all being caught on tape. I watched from the shadows, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The moment of reckoning. The world was finally seeing them for what they were. Bruce spotted me then, his eyes narrowing in rage. He started toward me, but I held my ground, my hand resting on the pistol tucked in my belt. "You did this," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "Damn right, I did," I replied, my voice steady. "You thought you could destroy my life and walk away? You thought you could betray me and I'd just take it? No, Bruce, this is what you get." He took a step closer, but Mike and his team were there, cameras rolling, capturing every moment. Bruce hesitated, realizing that any move he made would be on record. "You'll regret this, Jack," he hissed, his face twisted in fury. "No, Bruce," I said, my voice cold. "The only regret I have is not doing this sooner." With that, he turned and stormed off, pushing through the crowd of journalists who were now swarming the area. Robin followed him, her face a mask of shame and despair. I watched them go, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. It was done. They were finished. But I knew Bert was right. This was just the beginning. The fallout from this would be massive, and I'd have to be ready for whatever came next. But for now, I allowed myself a moment of victory. They had thought they were untouchable, but I had proved them wrong. As the sun began to set over Stonemore, I drove back to my house, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. There was still more to do, more battles to fight, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my life again. When I got home, I poured myself a drink and sat on the porch watching the sky darken. The storm had passed, but the real storm, the one I had unleashed, was just beginning. And I was ready for it. The following days felt like a whirlwind. The fallout from the exposure of the secret club was swift and brutal. The Stonemore Gazette, once a sleepy local paper, had exploded with headlines that seemed ripped from a crime novel. Judge Kagan's scandal shocks Stonemore. City officials under fire for illicit activities and church leader caught in love nest exposed were just a few of the banners plastered across newsstands. Everywhere I went, people were talking about it, at the grocery store, at work, even at Mabby's bar. The town was buzzing with the scandal, and for once, it wasn't me in the hot seat. My role in exposing the whole mess had been kept quiet, just as Mike Starr had promised. It wasn't about me, it was about bringing them down. But even as the world around me imploded, I kept my head down, focused on the next steps. Bert and I had filed for an emergency hearing, and Judge Kagan, now under investigation, was recused from our case. The new judge, Judge O'Malley, had a reputation for being fair but tough, just what we needed. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in my best suit, the one I hadn't worn since my wedding day. It felt strange, the fabric stiff against my skin, a stark reminder of how much had changed. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie, I caught a glimpse of the man I used to be. Confident, in control, unaware of the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface of my life. But now that man was gone. In his place was someone harder, more cynical, but also more determined. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for every person they had wronged, every trust they had betrayed. When I arrived at the courthouse, the place was swarming with reporters. They snapped pictures, shouted questions, but I ignored them, keeping my head down as I made my way inside. Bert was waiting for me just outside the courtroom, a stack of papers in hand. "Jack," he greeted me with a nod. "You ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my voice steady. We entered the courtroom, and I immediately felt the tension in the air. Robin was already there, sitting next to her new attorney, a weasel of a man named Justin Bieber, who had taken on her case after the scandal had forced her previous lawyer to withdraw. Bruce wasn't there, likely too busy dealing with the fallout from his own mess. The hearing began promptly, Judge O'Malley presiding. He was an older man, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. As Bert laid out our case, presenting the evidence of Robin's affair and the illegal activities tied to the secret club, I watched Robin's face crumble. She had always been so composed, so confident in her ability to manipulate situations to her advantage. But now, she was watching everything she had built fall apart. Justin Bieber tried to mount a defense, but it was weak. He was clearly outmatched by Bert, who tore through his arguments with precision. When the footage from the King James Hotel was played in court, there were audible gasps from the small crowd gathered in the gallery. Robin's face turned a shade of crimson, and she buried her head in her hands. By the time Bert finished, it was clear that the tide had turned in my favor. Judge O'Malley reviewed the evidence, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up, his gaze locking onto Robin. "Mrs. Erickson," he began, his voice firm but not unkind, "the evidence presented here today is overwhelming. It is clear to this court that you have violated the terms of your marriage and engaged in activities that are not only morally reprehensible, but also potentially illegal. As such, I see no reason to award you any alimony or further support from Mr. Erickson." Robin flinched as if she had been slapped. I watched as her last shred of hope evaporated before my eyes. "Furthermore," Judge O'Malley continued, "in light of the ongoing investigation into your involvement in the activities at the King James Hotel, this court strongly advises that you cooperate fully with the authorities. Your future well-being may very well depend on it." With that, the gavel came down and it was over. Just like that, I was free. Robin sat there, stunned, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. I stood up, ready to leave, but she reached out, grabbing my arm. "Jack, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't do this. We can still fix this." I looked down at her, feeling a strange mix of pity and contempt. There had been a time when I would have done anything to make things right between us, but that time was long gone. "It's too late, Robin," I said, my voice cold but firm. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." She let go of my arm, her hand falling limply to her side. For a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago, vulnerable, lost. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. I turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving her behind for good. Outside, the sun was shining, a sharp contrast to the dark clouds that had hovered over my life for so long. As I walked down the courthouse steps, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Bert caught up with me as I reached the bottom step. "You did good in there, Jack," he said, clapping me on the back. "Thanks, Bert," I replied, offering him a small smile. "I couldn't have done it without you." He nodded, his expression serious. You've been through hell, Jack, but you made it out the other side. Now it's time to start over. Start over. The words felt strange, but also full of possibility. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again, like I could see a future that wasn't clouded by betrayal and anger. As I drove home, I thought about what Bert had said. Starting over wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. I had been given a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. When I got home, I sat down on the porch with a cold beer, watching the sunset. The colors in the sky were vivid, the air cool and fresh. I thought about everything that had happened, everything I had lost, but also everything I had gained. I was free. Free from the lies, free from the pain, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The next chapter of my life was just beginning, and this time, I was going to make sure it was written on my terms.